Now, so my name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic. My date of sobriety is 24th of July 1993. So I'm in AA. I do a fair amount of CA and a fair amount of Al-Anon as well. If it wasn't for Al-Anon, I couldn't be continuing to go to AA surrounded by alcoholics with all the hijinks. So Al-Anon, if you find yourself tensing up when you go into an AA meeting, then maybe Al-Anon might be able to help. So the chapter we're going to look at, first of all, is chapter 4 of the big book, which is We Agnostics. And then the second part of it is going to be, having taken step 3, well, how do you actually have a relationship with a higher power on a daily basis? So where chapter 4 starts is with the basic definition of alcoholism, which I'm going to put it in my own language. Rather than reading from the book constantly, I'm just going to put it in my own kind of baby language, because then I can understand it, which is, when I drink way too much. And when I stop, I keep starting again. And no power within me can keep me away from the first drink. And at this point, it's going to start talking in step 2 about needing to have a God in your life. But you don't need to worry about the word God. Bill had a huge problem with the God stuff. You can read about it in Bill's story. I had a huge problem with the God stuff. I was atheist. There were some Christians at school, but we thought they were a bit odd. And they never said a word about their faith. Nothing. They were kind of songs of praise Christians. So that they liked the hymns and the Sunday evening that was kind of it, though. There wasn't any proselytizing. I didn't go to a religious school. But I've sponsored 500 people over the last 30 years, and everyone has got a problem with the higher power stuff. The really religious people have one problem. The people who've had a little bit of education about religion have got another. People who've had very bad experiences of religion have yet other difficulties. But the way the book, I think, is really clever, and this is what really helped me, was it saying, you've got a power problem. If you're an alcoholic and you know that to have the first drink is a complete disaster, you've got all the information you need. The problem now is putting that information into practice and staying away from the first drink. So lack of information is not the problem. Lack of power is the problem. Does that make sense? If you lose the track at any point, hands straight up in the air, because I'm kind of trusting that you're getting what I'm saying. And this notion of a higher power, it's a stroke of genius, because it's dodging the God question completely. Okay, speak more loudly. Okay, very good. So, we're dodging the God question completely. And we say what we need is a higher power. A power to do what? A power literally just to stay away from a drink. So I was filled with a sort of typical, I think, English atheism of thinking Christians are a little bit simple or very old-fashioned or something. The modern view amongst all the people I knew growing up was that there is no God, it's obvious, science proves it, that's the end of it, forget the whole question. Did anyone else have that view when they were growing up? I can see some nodding. Even people that went to Catholic schools, I know, have just put their hands up. But we're not interested at this point in, is there a spiritual realm? Is there a metaphysical realm? Is there a being in that physical realm? Can we call that being God? We're interested only in, can I access the power to stay away from a drink even though I want to drink? And where it comes at that is it says, look around you in AA. And what I did in my early meetings, I heard hundreds of stories where people described themselves as alcoholics who had no power, who had this new power to actually stay away from a drink. So we're not worried about God creating the universe. How old is the universe? We're not worried about science. We're not worried about any of that. You're looking at your home group. You see Sally in your home group and Neville in your home group who say, I didn't have the power to stay sober. I now have the power. So we now know they've gone from having no power to having power. And that power was greater than them. So the first question it asks me in We Agnostics to ask myself is, do I believe, or am I willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? It doesn't say believe in one. It says, do you believe that there is one? And so I look at Sally and I look at all of the other people. I remember sitting in a meeting in Ifield Road in London in 1993, and there are 120 people in the room. And I thought, either they have all accessed a power of some description, or they're all faking it. And I simply wasn't paranoid enough to believe that they'd all put on this show for me, because they so obviously didn't. I was at one of those slippers that was, I'd slip, come back, slip, come back, slip, come back. They were used to me. They let me be there, but they were paying attention to the real newcomers, like the ones that were going to get it. So I wasn't even the centre of their attention anymore. So I was observing this bunch of people from the outside. And I thought they're either faking it or they have accessed power. Now, if you think about going into your kitchen and switching the kettle on, your evidence is when you flick the switch of the kettle, the water boils. And with this analogy, watching people in AA, it's watching them put the kettle on. You don't even have to put the kettle on yourself. You just have to watch other people put it on. You don't need to understand the power stations that produce the electricity. You don't need to understand the national grid. You don't need to understand your electricity bill. You don't need to understand anything. You just need to know where the button is. And your evidence for there being a power station, an electricity grid, a power company, is the fact that the kettle works. And my whole problem, you see, I would come at this question of God, spirituality, all of that, from the point of view of, well, let's start with the power station. But I can't see a power station in my kitchen, and you're telling me there's a power station. That was my logic. I can't see God, so there isn't God. God isn't in the living room, so God doesn't exist. There was one of the Russian cosmonauts, Yuri Gagarin, went out into space and famously said, ha ha ha, there's no God out here, as if to say, if God existed, you would necessarily see God in space, like you wouldn't see God in Milton Keynes or Petropavlovsk or wherever else. But out in space, perhaps you'd see God. If he wasn't there, he wasn't. Looking in the wrong place, Yuri. But we'll come to that. We'll come to the question of where to look in a minute. But the starting point is this. Do I believe that other people have accessed this commodity of power? We're not interested even at this point whether what the source of that power is, how that power gets from the source to us. We're just interested in our use of that power. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's just really basic, really operational, just like a kettle. Now, this question, I could see this power operating in other people's lives. And you can see it not just with the fact that people are sober, but the fact that people are sailing through life, as Joyce Grenfell put it in one of her monologues, stately as a galleon. People sailing through life, having the power to respond to difficult situations with poise and grace and cheer and cheerfulness. And that's evidence of power operating in people's lives. And I was like a pincushion which the world was sticking pins in. I had no power to respond to difficult situations with grace or poise. I responded to difficult situations with screaming and panic attacks and running away and hiding under the duvet and drinking. So those people were simply doing better than me. But here's the thing. I met two types of people before I got to AA. There were people who were crazy as anything and like me, and people who are like nice and vegetarian and did jogging and had pensions and looked slightly aghast when I expressed myself about what was going on inside me. So 2 categories of people who are effed and people who are dull. Like, there was nothing in between. And the people who could cope were dull, but who wants to be dull? And then the people who were effed had nothing to offer me, but they were fun and interesting. What was weird about AA, what was new about AA, was there are people that had moved from one group to the other, but retained their interestingness. So they were still interesting, but bizarrely able to cope with stuff, untouched by what was going on around them. So step 2 doesn't start with considering theology. It doesn't start with considering nature, considering the religion one grew up with or didn't grow up with. It starts just with looking at other people in AA and saying these people have accessed power. Now, the question that comes next is, I know that there is a power operating in the universe. What's bigger, me or it? And if you're new in AA, if you're very lucky, your experience will be like mine, which is that you'll start to care for other people without meaning to. You see another newcomer who's like 4 days less sober than you, and suddenly you're mother hen, trying to look after them and fix them and rescue them and be their saviour, whatever else. You just have this, you sense the vulnerability because it's your own vulnerability and you want to look after them. And then you realise there is literally nothing you can do to keep them sober. And they keep drinking and they keep drinking. You throw everything at it. And then they have a rock bottom and they start doing some steps and they're staying sober now. And you know that they're having the experience that you can't bring about in that other person. That they've accessed power and you were not it. So this question, this power that exists in the boxing ring with alcoholism, which power is greater? This power can do stuff in other people's lives that I can't do in those lives. I saw the powerlessness of people over other people's alcoholism in my family I grew up in. My brother was alcoholic. So now we're gradually building this up. We have a power greater than ourselves, or a power greater than them, and it's greater than us. It's greater than me. It can do things I can't do. And then something else occurred to me in my first few months, which is when you hear people's stories, I liked meetings in my first few months, not where everyone was clean cut and was doing really well, but meetings where everyone was a little bit damaged. Because I just found the meetings where people were very well too intimidating, because it seemed too far away from where I was. I needed people who were kind of bleeding and on fire on a regular basis, because I thought I'm bleeding and on fire constantly, so I identify with them. And the amazing thing is, I looked round at those groups and thought, my God, everyone in here is completely hopeless, and yet we're all staying sober. So it's not that we're putting together little bits of competence and together this is producing this power. Something is operating here. It's so much more than the individuals. It's like adding 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and making 4,015. There's a gap there. And I tried to use other people in AA to keep me sober. I would manipulate people into letting me stay on their sofas. I would phone people morning, noon and night. I would phone people with panic attacks in the middle of the night. People who weren't yet going to Al-Anon, so the phone was still on in the middle of the night. And I drained people like a vampire. I used them in order to try and stay sober. And it works for about 2 weeks. And then the alcoholism proves more powerful. So what was really clear was that there was a power operating, and it wasn't me. and it wasn't any other individual, and it wasn't even the group of people collectively. For a while, I thought it was an AA group that might be doing it. But here's what happened to me. I didn't do any step work for the first 7 or 8 months. And whilst meetings kept me sober initially, the meetings stopped keeping me sober until I started an experiment of simply opening up to a higher power. And my first prayer was, help. I knew I was going to drink that day because all the signs were there. The pattern had activated. It was working its way through. I was about half an hour from detonation. I knew that. And the previous time I'd drunk, I'd been arrested and run over by 12:30 on a Saturday afternoon. So I thought, if this happens again, it's going to be curtains. I need to be really, really careful. And I accessed a higher power directly, simply by asking. I asked, and there was nothing else going on in me, just this open-throated asking for help. And that was the thing that proved to me that there was something going on which was more than just the individuals in AA, more than just the fellowship of AA as a whole. There was something beyond that. What was explained to me is that the bit of AA you can see is just one aspect of the higher power. It's the commodity you're getting. Is in step 11, it says a couple of things. It talks about knowledge of God's will for us, and then the power to carry that out. Those are the two commodities coming down the tubes. There's a whole supply chain behind that. There is whatever the higher power is way beyond anything I can see. And going back to this Russian cosmonaut, I was talking to someone in a restaurant last night, not someone who was at the convention, just some punters at the next table who were drinking beer, so I figured they hadn't been at the convention. But you never know, do you? You never. So these conventions can be a lot, so if people went and had a beer, I could understand why that might be the case. But we were talking, and we ended up talking about God. We ended up talking about faith by hook and by crook. And the chap said something which was really understandable to me. He said, there is no evidence for the existence of God. And what he meant by that is there is no evidence in the way that there's evidence that there are broad beans in my freezer at home, because you open the freezer and there are the broad beans. I was looking for God in that way. Now, the idea that was presented to me, and this runs through the big book, but it comes through very strongly in We Agnostics, this idea that behind material reality there is something else. And I think Bill is doing about 6,000 years of pretty advanced theology in 14 pages. People criticise the chapter, but by God, I can't imagine anyone who would have done it better. What he says is, think of the steel girder. Even scientists say that what you see, you think that's something solid. You think that's a piece of steel, and it's steel all the way through, like Brighton Rock says Brighton all the way through. Whereas what physicists say is the steel isn't there the way you think it is. It's not solid. It's these tiny little atoms, and even those atoms aren't really there. They're these tiny little forces, and together they create this appearance of solidity to us. The truth of the steel girder is it's little atoms spinning round, and even those are just forces. So even with the physical universe, what you see is not what is really there. There's an American physicist called Linde, L-I-N-D-E, who says, we have to say the table is there because it's the only way we can talk. If we had to talk in terms of atoms the whole time, we'd go completely mad. But you have to remember, the table isn't really there. It's atoms, it's forces. The same physicist said if you took all of the matter in the universe and clumped it together with no gaps in between things, it would be about the size of a baseball. That's it. It's all energy. So that's just with physical things. But to go back to the chapter, it's got the steel girder stuff. And this is all the stuff I use with sponsees. We simply go through, we agnostics, word by word, sentence by sentence, and we talk about it. And at the end of that, I've never had someone that doesn't say, you know what, I'm signed up to this now. It's a very powerful chapter. You don't have to do anything with the sponsee. The chapter kind of does it for you. But it's not just at the level of the physical. It says, what really matters to you in life? It's your friendships. It's your relationships. It's the starry nights. It's the sunsets. It's the things of value, are things that if someone said, prove that you love Sally, prove that you love your mother, where is the physical evidence? Where are the scientific tests for the fact that you appreciate that sunset? It's just not there. And it's a stroke of brilliance to me, because then I started to understand, if I'm going to look for the existence of a metaphysical realm, a realm beyond the physical, if I'm going to look for, is there a God? Is there something going on beyond the physical world? The physical world is not the place to look for it. I'm looking in the wrong place. If you're in the kitchen and you're trying to prove the existence of the dining room and what goes on in the dining room, you're not going to find it in the kitchen. You're going to find it in the dining room. You have to go into the dining room to find it. C.S. Lewis, who's very, very good on questions of faith and belief and so on, says you have to use logic when it comes to developing a relationship with God. It's no good just telling people, believe in God. You've got to use some logic, you've got to use some reason. It's exactly what Bill says all through the chapter. We believe in a power greater than ourselves because we see the evidence of it in the lives of the people around us. But what C.S. Lewis says, he goes further and he says, if someone says the cat is in the airing cupboard, and you want to find out whether the cat is in the airing cupboard, logic tells you, reason tells you, not to work it out theoretically, but to go and look in the airing cupboard. Then you'll see if the cat is there. Now, with this looking for a higher power, unfortunately, you have to look within, because that's the access point. Now, the danger, and I've fallen into this trap, of thinking that the higher power is this little sort of elf that I'm carrying around within me. This little helpmeet in emergencies for crises. But the image that was given to me, which was amazingly helpful, someone said, now the internet. In your home, your computer is connected to the internet. You have to go into your home, into the special place where the computer is, where it's connected, and then you're connecting to the internet. But what you're connecting into is not all contained within your flat. The whole internet is not inside the computer. It is simply the access point. So when the book says you need to look deep down within, it's not that God is this little tiny thing contained within you somewhere. The access point is within you, but what the access point is an access point to is infinite and goes on forever. Does that make a little bit of sense? So Bill's approach is to say you start with the evidence and you build up this logic that if something is keeping all of them sober and helping them live, it exists. What it is, don't worry about that. It exists. And then it says, if it exists for them, this is the step 2 proposition. Crushed by a self-imposed crisis we couldn't avoid or postpone. Either God is everything or God is nothing. And what that means very concretely is either God can save everyone or it isn't worth a damn thing to me. And what I found in AA, if you hear enough stories, this is why it didn't help me in ordinary home groups just to be told work the steps, work the steps, work the steps. I needed to hear people's stories to realise there were people cleverer than me and stupider than me and younger than me and older than me and better wrapped than me and worse wrapped than me and had worse drinking histories or lighter drinking histories, to realise that the people on both sides, up and down, left and right, back and front, were all getting well. I was in the middle of the bed. So there was no reason that what worked for them wasn't going to work for me. And that's, God is everything doesn't mean God is in the hydrangeas. It means God is available to everyone. All I have to do is meet a couple of conditions. Does that make sense? And then this whole idea, what opened it up for me was the idea that the things that are real, you can't necessarily touch. And Bill uses the experience of friendship as an obvious example, that the things which are so important are way beyond the nuts and bolts of material evidence. You believe in those, very good. You believe that when you say you love someone, that has some meaning, very good. Maybe you can have faith, because you can have all of those other things which are non-scientific, non-rational, not provable, based on what? Sentiment. You love someone, why? It's not because they're smarter or more beautiful or more anything. You just do. You didn't even ask to. It just happened. And so this idea that, well, I will only believe in something if it's real and logical. Well, I'm not like that with anything else. Why should I be like that with a higher power? And all of this stuff, it softened me up. But ultimately, the thing which totally softened me up was the idea that I was going to die of alcoholism unless I tried to access this power. And what was amazing was when I was up against it, you kind of have to wait till you're totally up against it. When I was up against it, it was the only thing left that I hadn't tried. And you can jump off a diving board reluctantly. You can jump off a diving board terrified. But if there's a monster chasing you onto the diving board, you'll do it. And that was what my first experience with God was like. It wasn't because I was softened up by all those other things, but what got me to do it was alcohol. That was the final persuader, which is one of the reasons why you can't force faith on any sponsee or anyone else you're trying to help. You have to wait until they have literally nothing else to go on, and you've given them all the tools, you've given them all the background, you've given them all the context, and then they have to make that leap. That's kind of it on step 2. Does anyone have any questions or difficulties they've experienced with sponsees that they would wonder how to handle? Any hands? No. So I want to talk a little bit about step 3, and then we'll get on to the nuts and bolts on step 11. So when it gets to step 3, we've already decided that I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to die of my alcoholism unless it's arrested, and I need a power greater than myself before, if I'm going to live, I'm going to need a power greater than myself to come in to stop me from having the first drink. And you'd think it's going to say at this point in the book, right, get on with it, go and serve God, but it doesn't. It says, wait a second, we've got a couple of pages to look at. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Now, the reason that's in there is because what it's asking me to do in order to be saved by God is to have a life where from first thing in the morning till last thing at night, I'm saying to God, what do you want me to do? It's not a matter of me running my life the whole time and occasionally when there's a crisis saying, God help me. It's a matter of putting your whole life on an entirely new basis, which is a really tall order. And so what it needs to do to get me to do that is to say, how good a job have you been doing at running the rest of your life up to this point? How are you doing with that? And the answer is really badly. When I my first 15 years of AA, I was solid on the action, but I only had one toe dipped into the God side of the program. just enough to keep me sober, but I was still running a lot of things myself. And someone asked me a very simple question. I was 35 at the time. They said, "Are you happy?" And I said, well, in some areas of my life, things are going really well, certainly a lot better than they used to go. But honestly, my relationship with my mother, still problematic. My relationship with money, still problematic. My relationship with food, still problematic. There are a lot of things which aren't right. Panic attacks occasionally happening. And the person said, "Can you try and reduce the answer to yes or no? Are you happy? Yes or no?" We went round a few more times until I reduced it to no. And he said, "When did you think your plan for living was going to kick in and start working? You've been having a go at your plan for 35 years. What, another 6 months is going to help? You're suddenly going to turn the corner, are you? You're going to gradually inch your way towards happiness. Why don't you give up?" And again, it's exactly the desperation I had with alcohol. It was a slower desperation because I was coping. My life was very good in lots of ways, but there was this sense that whatever happiness was, I was never actually going to get there. And I'd lost hope that inching towards it would ever work. So what it offers me is a completely new way of looking at things, which is to forget everything you think you want, just the whole thing. Because by the time I'll give you a little story, by the time I was 30, I was 8 years sober. Everything I had in my material life, the job, the house, all of the situations in my life, I'd chosen sober, but I was unhappy. And I started to realise, my God, I choose things that make me unhappy. Not everything. Some things were very good. Some of the relationships in my life were very good. But boy, the way I'd chosen to structure my life, I'd made those decisions on my own. I was terrified of making another decision. But look at how all of the other ones turned out. I stopped trusting myself. In the same way that I stopped trusting my rationalizations about alcohol and why it was such a good idea that I drink, I had to stop trusting my rationalizations about the rest of my life as well. Does anyone have that experience? Okay. The new basis is this, and I think this is a brilliant thing in the big book as well. It gives you a number of different ways of considering the relationship with God. So I know a lot of people in AA who felt that they weren't loved as children, and what they really, really need is God as a parental figure. And they need to feel that God loves them. They like being told that God loves them. And it's helpful and it's wonderful. So it gives you God as father or God as parent and us as children. Sentiment makes my blood run backwards. Whenever anyone tells me God loves me, I kind of step back a couple of paces. It's not my way of looking at things. And that's fine. We're all built differently. So it gives you other models. It gives you employer and employee. And I can handle that. I can handle the idea of showing up every day for God and say, what do you want me to do today? It gives you principal and agent. So a principal, let's say a ship owner, has agents in ports who deal with all of their business. The agent doesn't give a damn about the ship or the cargo. He's paid a salary. Everything belongs to the principal, the ship owner. And it's like that with my life. None of my life belongs to me. I can hold it at arm's length. I just have to do the right thing, and that's where my satisfaction lies. That's the promise. If you place the weight on God and say the thing that matters to me is doing the right thing, regardless of the results, I can't fail at that. I can fail very, very badly in the material world. but I can't fail in that because God's really sloppy. God doesn't care about the results, it appears. God cares about my effort. So I get rewarded even if the results are terrible. Have you ever sponsored someone for a few months or even a few years? I sponsored someone for 10 years and then they relapsed. Now, that's their life, that's their story. But I wasn't punished by God for the fact that they relapsed. I was kept sober through that, even though they relapsed after 10 years. And it's like that with everything else. My friend Pauline got sober in 1971 or so. She had a business, she developed a business, and for 20 years it was amazing, but then the world changed, the type of business she did disappeared. Her profession literally no longer existed. And someone went up to her in a meeting and said, "You're so brave because you failed in business and yet you're so cheerful." She said, "Oh, no, darling. No. The business failed. I haven't failed." And that opened up everything for me. Because my whole existence for the first few years of AA was based on results, not action. I need the external proof that I'm doing well. And there's a contemporary religious figure, I won't say which one because it might be controversial, but he wrote something recently. He said one of the worst things about the contemporary ideologies is the idea that people's value can be measured by how effective they are, how efficient they are, and how much they produce, that people need to earn their right to exist, rather than just people are of infinite value simply because they exist. And I had a real problem with that, because I thought, if I'm of value without having to do anything, what's the point in even living? My whole life was based on becoming something to prove I was of value. I was terrified. What is my life going to look like if I don't have to do anything to be okay? I was more frightened of that than of failing at the game of life. So my whole philosophy, it turned out, was completely wrong. But the last image, and I think it's completely brilliant, that Bill uses all through the big book, is the idea of the actor. And does anyone remember that on page 60? So you've got the actor, you're on the stage, and people say, "I've been being the director this week." And that's not what the book says. It's the actor who thinks he's the director. You're not the director, sunshine. Now, the reason it's such a brilliant image, and it comes back all the way through the book, so on page 68, when it's talking about fear, it does the same thing. It says, we're here in the world to play the role that God ascribes. Now, I'm going to come back to the actor thing, but I want to tell you a story about a friend of mine who relapsed a few years, quite a lot of years into AA, a few years ago. And we're very close, and we saw things in a very similar way in AA, except for one thing. He viewed the material world as being all that there was. So that when you die and your brain ceases to function, that's the end of you. You might live on in the hearts and minds of other people, well, great. But essentially, that's the end of you. After that, you're a few memories in the minds of people who themselves are going to die. And I technically agreed with him, but part of me said, there's more to it than that. My instinct said there was more to it than that. Now, this sounds like it's a really dull philosophical question or an abstract one or a pointless one. I don't think it is. I've known a number of people who've relapsed after many years, and the pattern is very similar, and I know this is what is going on because I've talked to them and I almost fell for it myself. If I think this is all there is, if I look at the world and what is going on in the world and the direction things are going politically, economically, societally, environmentally, all of that, you turn on the news seems to be sometimes a catalogue of the 47 ways in which the human race is going to expire in the next 10 to 15 years. And then you look at your own catastrophes, you look at the people in your own life who've died, the projects which have failed, the careers which evaporate because AI eliminates them. If my whole life is just how successful things are in a material sense, I can see why this chap gave up. I can see why other people gave up. I need something else to live for than having a successful material life and things being okay here. I need more than that. Does that make any sense? Does anyone else identify with that? And there is another C.S. Lewis. All my material comes from C.S. Lewis in the big book. There's a C.S. Lewis book called The Great Divorce, which is a sort of imagination of what happens after death. And he talks about, it's a sort of fantasy, and he talks about a woman who, on Earth, was kind to animals, took in stray animals, was kind to small children who were ill-treated by their own parents. And in this other realm, after life, she was treated as this great goddess, as this great queen. And all the people who'd been important on Earth were nothing over there. The things which are of real value are not the things which seem to be of real value. So I'm looking for value in something other than the material. But back to the actor thing. I don't know about you, but I'm really sensitive to things, and I react really badly to very small setbacks and frustrations. I notice I can walk into a room, find everything that's wrong. I can work for a company and just be overwhelmed by all the things I see going. I'm the spotter of errors. And when I find something that's wrong, my jaws clamp on it, and it takes a lot for me to let go. Now, ironically, what I do for a living is literally find mistakes in things and correct them. So the world has found something useful to do with someone like me. But the point is that I get really wrapped up in the details of my life. I get really wrapped up in the details of other people's lives. I get really wrapped up in the world. I have to go through detoxes of social media, detoxes of the media. I have to have whole days where I just don't turn on the radio or television just to get the poison out of my system. But what the big book does, it gives me a solution to this, which is better than just having to switch off all the devices. And it's this, it's the actor thing. So I don't know if any of you have ever seen Macbeth, but it ain't a barrel of laughs. It starts with blood on the floor, and there's blood everywhere by the end of it. Now, if you are one of the characters in Macbeth, let's say Macduff, and you start to figure out what's going on as one of the characters, it's going to make you a little edgy. When you start to see people stabbed left, right, and centre, that makes a person uncomfortable when you realise you could be next. And it can feel very much like that. The world seems, to a materialist like I basically am, very threatening. The threat hailing on all frequencies. What the big book says is, you're not the role, you're the actor playing the role. I heard someone say many years ago, and this is what started to turn me on to this idea. He said, if you are invested in being the husband and your spouse divorces you, when the divorce papers come through, husband no longer exists and is replaced by a new character, divorcee. If your identity is husband, who are you when husband disappears? And it's the same with all of the other roles. If I'm the actor, if I'm Gavin, the actor, playing Macduff, but I forget that I am the actor, I'm going to have a really hard time with the script of Macbeth, and I'm going to try and change the script. I'm not going to be happy with the role that I've been assigned. This is where all the trouble comes. What I'm asked to do instead is to be a servant of God in the world, which means to remember I'm the actor, I'm the person who is playing the roles. I'm the one who is observing all the crap that my physical brain throws at me. And the actor, imagine you're an actor playing one of the Lady Macbeth or Macduff. You're being paid by the theatre. You're not being paid by the King of Scotland. If your character dies, you stay alive. It's not the end of you. Anne Lamott, who's a very good writer, said, death is a fairly major change of address. Once I started to get a glimpse that I was not the roles that I was playing, I just have to discharge those roles well for God, who is off stage as the director, as the producer. If that's the value that I see, I'm fine. And a spiritual awakening is like the actor who's playing the role, who's forgotten he's an actor, waking up and saying, oh my God, you mean I'm not Macduff? I'm Gavin, who lives in Burnt Oak, who gets the bus home, and everything is safe, everything is fine. And this way, when stuff happens, I can be detached. So over the period, there was a period of about 1.5 years where my best friend died through alcoholism. My closest sponsee died of cancer. My mother died. My sister died. My aunt died. My 3 closest living relatives died. This was all in the space of about a year. Now, that's the sort of stuff that can knock you sideways. My emotions were knocked sideways, but I was not knocked sideways. I was solid. I was fine. The ocean is not hurt by the waves going on the surface of the ocean. The waves don't hurt the ocean. And this is the amazing thing. You'd think the detachment would make you cold, but it's the opposite. It makes you strong enough to feel what's going on without being frightened of it. So these enormous waves of emotion I could handle because I recognize there's more to me, there's more to life than the stuff that I'm seeing. These are just things that are passing through. Just a little bit about steps 10 and 11. I was in a meeting many years ago where a chap said he couldn't do meditation because he had restless leg syndrome. Now, I understand because I used to have restless leg syndrome. I don't anymore. But the point was, his assumption was that to do meditation, you've got to sit in a particular position for a really long time. And if you can't sit still, you can't meditate. And I've been to so many meditation meetings in AA over the years, and almost every single one has said, right, if you don't know anything about meditation, then it's considered that you adopt a certain posture and you breathe in this way and you imagine your thoughts going past you like clouds, and then there are guided meditations. These are all wonderful things. And this is not to knock Eastern meditation or transcendental meditation or Christian meditation or any of those other things. But the thing about the language of the Big Book is when we say meditation now in step 11, what I want to do is say the people that wrote the step in 1939, what did they mean when they said meditation? And what they meant was not what we understand by it now. When you look up my home group, Brick Lane, Big Book Study, we have a 1930s American dictionary, and people yell out dictionary when we hit a certain word, and then the definition is read out, and quite often people are like, oh, so that's what it means. A meditation in this dictionary says concentrated thought. So meditation is thinking about things. And in the Big Book, it tells us to do prayer and meditation, and then it says we're going to make some definite and valuable suggestions. There's nothing in the step 11 in the Big Book about posture or breathing or any. No, those are wonderful things. I do those things too, but they're not my step 11. They're something else. What it tells you to do is this. It's not very ambitious, I'll tell you that. On awakening, let us think. Think, not think. The aim is not to not think. Okay, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. already it said the past out of bounds, the future out of bounds, just 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. So to have a relationship with God, I know I've said some abstract things, but to have a relationship with God on a Saturday or a Thursday is for me to think about my plans for the day. And this is why someone like me, who is so wrapped up in the material world, can actually do step 11, because I can handle that. I can't handle abstract theology. I can't get my head around it. But this, I can consider my plans for the day. I can consider what I'm going to do at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, and I'm seeing Sally and she annoys me, so what attitude am I going to take towards her? And I'm going to see this person and that person. There's this meeting. How am I going to handle the group conscience meeting? When my other half leaves the heating on, how am I going to handle it? Because I tend to fly off the handle when I walk in, and he'll leave the heating on. And when it gets too hot, he'll open the windows rather than... No one knows why he does this, even him. I anticipate the situations which I'm going to have to face that day. But the thing is, it's not just me considering it on my own. It's before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. Now, if you're wondering how to do that, it's very simple. You say, God, direct my thinking. You don't have to have a PhD in theology to turn that into a little prayer. God, please direct my thinking. Please divorce it from self-pity, dishonest or self-seeking motives. Now, it's asking me to do this every morning, to ask God to divorce me from those three things. It's like overnight my mind has eloped to Vegas to remarry self-pity, dishonest and self-seeking motives, and I have to be re-divorced every morning. I get reattached to my life very, very quickly, and it needs to be snipped off on a daily basis. And the thing is, I've heard people say about meditation, I can't meditate because my mind just goes over and over and over and over. I just keep thinking. Now, I know people who've managed to kind of almost shut that down, and I bow down to such people. I'm not one of those people. I asked my other half, who's not in recovery, but is just naturally spiritually balanced or something. I said, what do you think about on the way to work? He said, nothing. I said, what do you mean, nothing? He said, nothing. I said, do you mean you're not really thinking anything? He said, occasionally a thought crosses my mind, but not really. I'm not like that. But I don't have to become like that. My first sponsor said, you don't have to become like me. You have to become like you. You're supposed to become yourself. You're not supposed to become anyone else. You work with who you are. You work with the material you're given. And I'm someone, my mind just works constantly. So the question is not whether my mind is working, it's who's in charge. Is it my ego or is it God? And a great spiritual teacher said to me, your ego is constantly active, ready to answer first whenever you ask it a question. So unless you're actively turning the dial to God, your ego is going to be the one giving you directions. So it's not the choice, am I going to be in charge or is God going to be in charge? It's no, I've got to be listening to one voice or the other. Whose voice is it? And all step 11 is saying, you're going to be listening to a chattering head. At least it better be God chattering to you than the ego chattering to you. Just change the chatter channel. I had a very cheap microwave. Most things I own are very cheap because I'm very cheap. But I had a very cheap microwave. It was a tiny little pink microwave. And it developed this fault where there was this, the heat button. At one end, it's got like full power. And the other end of the button is defrost. And if you have something on defrost, it literally does nothing. Like for an hour and the thing is still rock solid. So you have to have everything on full power. It developed this really weird fault where whenever you turned it on, the button would gradually turn back to the defrost. And you'd think it was going to be cooked, but no, because the button had turned. And my brain is like that. You turn it towards God, You look away, you go and do something else, and tick, 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 and within 20 minutes, it's back to self. And so now, I can't change the design. That's just how I am. But what I've learned to do is to just keep turning the dial back towards God. Turn it back to God, turn it back to God, turn it back to God. I do that not because it doesn't work, it hasn't worked, but because its operation has a limited shelf life. It's not like you turn your life over to God, oh, it's turned over to God now, that's the end of it. It's going to tick back to self the whole time. That's the manufacturer's design. So the program is not for people who are super spiritual. I think the program is for knuckleheads like me who are basically selfish and self-centered and think about themselves a lot. It gives you a way to live. It gives you a way to tune into God, even though tuning into God is absolutely not your thing. Why do you do it? Because it works. And I look at my life now, I can handle anything that's happened. I've handled everything that's happened over the last 33 years, eventually, so I know that it works. On the selfishness front, someone told a little bit of a joke. They said, have you ever considered that when a giraffe drinks a cup of coffee, by the time the coffee reaches its stomach, it's already cold? No, of course you haven't. You only ever think of yourself. And that's me. When I hear a news story, my initial thought is, how's this going to affect me? If it's not going to affect me, I can be so spiritual about accepting the facts of the world. As soon as it might affect me, bang goes that. So the program is designed for someone like me. It's not designed for the super spiritual people. It's designed for people who are naturally unspiritual to have a spiritual life anyway. And then a really simple thing it goes on to say, and this is all the meditation I do. There's a meditation in the evening, which I'll come to very briefly. But in the morning, basically, I look at all the things I have to do today. I already have the plans. It says we consider our plans for the day, which means we already have them. We're just asked to consider them. And if there's anything troubling me, I just say to God, how should I look at this? Attitudes. What should I do about this? Actions. Attitudes plus actions equals AA. I write it down, get on with it. Takes 5 to 10 minutes. If I'm in a really bad way, 20 minutes. But no more than that. If I don't know what to do, I ask myself, if a sponsee came to you with this problem, what would you say? And the problem is you always know. You always know exactly what you would say to someone else. You just don't want to hear it yourself. You know the answer is let go. And then it says, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. So all I have to do, if I don't know what to do, if I don't know how to handle something, God, give me inspiration, give me an intuitive thought, give me a decision. Now the question I came up with was, what if I don't hear anything? That's because God doesn't want me to know the answer yet. So I don't need to worry my little head about it. As long as I've got things to do today, that's enough. And so sometimes people trouble God with questions like, what shall I do with my life? And that's not the question. The question is, what shall I do after breakfast? What shall I do this afternoon? God literally doesn't trust me to ask questions beyond the scope of today. That whole keep it in the day, when you realise how limited it is, you realise what trouble you're in. That you're not trusted with anything here. Just very basic entry-level stuff. You don't get to know anything beyond the day. You don't get to know what anyone else's story is. You don't get to know what would have happened if. You don't get to know why. You just get to know things to do. With the evening review, so on page 86 in step 11, there's the second type of meditation, which is considering the past 24 hours, what went well, what went badly. And for ages, I used to do these elaborate written step 11s, and then I'd send them to people, and they'd send me theirs. And I suppose it's not a bad thing. I'd learned something by doing it. But I have trouble reading because what I do when I read something, I read what I think it ought to say, not what it actually says. I think I was 25 years sober when I realised this. You know at school when you do an essay and the teacher says, you have to read the question, you didn't read the question? It's like that with this. So when we retire at night, by the way, 1930s dictionary, at night, it says night is nightfall. So the beginning of the evening. Not last thing at night when you're screwed and you're about to go to sleep. Let's analyse the day and all the things that upset. And then you say you can't sleep and you have to have, CBD. That's where that one goes. No, at the end of the day, so you can go and have a nice evening, clear all the crap out of the way. And when we retire at night, retire to step back from the day, to step back from the business of life. So I do this at the end of the working day, not 5 to midnight. Anyway, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Now, what I read that as, were we resentful? Please tell us in enormous detail all the things that you resent and work out which areas of self it affects. This affects my self-esteem. This affects my brother. That's not the question. Were we resentful? That admits of 2 answers, yes or no. It doesn't care about the detail. It's got a problem only with the fact that I'm resentful. So my job is immediately not to investigate the disgusting little details of the resentment, but to say, you know what, I need to let this person go because they're doing their best, or if they're not, they can't help it. Just like I'm either doing my best or I'm not, in which case I can't help it in that minute. I need to let them go, they're like me. It's not about the detail. With fear, again, were we frightened? Oh, I need to do another fear inventory and work out why I have these fears and what happened when I was 7, and this is why in the house I grew up in and my family of origin and da la 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 la. No. Were you frightened? Yes or no, buddy? Pick a box. Yes. Oh, that'll be because you weren't trusting God. Oh, but I can't see how things are going to be okay. It doesn't ask you to be able to see how things are going to be okay. It asks you to trust God. I don't know if you've ever had a situation, a legal situation, and your blood runs backwards. You can't imagine how you're going to deal with it. I had one where I was potentially going to be sued for a toe-curdling amount of money. And I went to a solicitor, and he said, this. We've seen this before. You'll be fine. Just do exactly what I say. Don't ask any questions. And here's the bill. So I paid the bill. I did exactly what he said. And the problem went away. Now, the problem went away practically at the end of the process. My psychological problem went away the moment I said to the solicitor, tell me what to do. And he said, don't worry, it'll be fine. I thought, it'll be fine. And I went back home and said to my other half, it's going to be fine. Because I trusted the solicitor, because the solicitor knew what he was doing. He was a top solicitor in this area. He'd seen the case 100 times before in different forms. And that's what God is saying to me. You don't have to understand this, little buddy. You just have to trust me. So this evening review is not about me going into the bin, pulling out all of the tissues that I've blown my nose into and opening them up to see what I can see in them, like a soothsayer. It's about taking the trash out, getting rid of it so it's just gone. And so all God is really asking me to do is to trust that it's going to be okay, and trust that the simple system of putting one foot in front of another and doing the next right action will eventually solve everything. I've got one final story, but does anyone have any questions? Yes.
I'm Sandra, I'm an alcoholic. The one thing that I learned to do, and it's a word I love words, when I was doing that, do the step 11, like you, I do it after I finish my dinner, or while I'm eating my dinner, or somewhere at that point, so that it's well to rest. But I was given the word covenant. And you know when you're making that list in the morning, and so I was, because I'm very undisciplined, I have the daily, I'm retired, but I still have the daily book, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. And it was suggested strongly by a sponsored person, strongly, that I say, 12 o'clock I have this to do, 2 o'clock I have this to do. My life's not that full. Now, I'm talking to God while I'm putting this in my journal, and that's a covenant with God. And the world has to blow up before I miss that time at 12, I miss that time at 2. And I only started doing this, so I'm sober quite a while. I only started doing this probably late 2025, and the difference in my life, because I've given myself, me and God have given myself a schedule that I'm not going to deviate from, because I said in the morning this was a good idea to do this, not to the point of the ridiculous when I'm having a shower or something, but something to do with muggles or the outside world or my sobriety or my life. And I make that little word, I love that word covenant, and that, I just thought I'd add that.
Yeah, it's really helpful. So I don't know how well people could hear at the back, so I'll hopefully summarise and maybe add a little bit to it. I sponsor people not just in AA, but also in CA and CMA, Crystal Meth Anonymous, and Al-Anon, other fellowships as well. And I was a slipper, and I've sponsored a lot of slippers. And my formula for sobriety right at the beginning was, if I draw up a day plan at the beginning of the day as part of my step 11, all I have to do is stick to that day plan the rest of the day, and I could only drink by deliberately going off the day plan. I'm not leaving myself any space, so, well, I'll see how I feel about it later on. Disaster. My first sponsor said to me, unstructured free time is the worst thing for any alcoholic. And if it's wrong, if the plan really is wrong, well, you'll have a bad experience and you'll learn from it. You don't need to second guess. So it's the way, that's how I got out of slipping. That's how I've seen other people get out of slipping.
How I get out of deep, dark grief and depression.
There you go. The story I wanted to tell is a little sort of, it's not of interest to anyone else, but it's a very small miracle in my life. As with lots of people's occupations, things have been changing very quickly over the last 20 years because of technology. And things which were surefire business prospects 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, are looking a lot shakier. And I've been terrified of this at moments over the last 20 years. And the work has been getting thinner and thinner and thinner. I went from a position a few years ago of having more work than I could handle to just having enough. And work always just about comes in. It's all right. And then early this year, I had a couple of months where it was really quiet. And I've been resisting on all sorts of grounds, going into a new area. I won't say what I do for a living, but going into a new area using new technology. So I didn't agree with it on all sorts, for industrial reasons and for professional reasons and ethical reasons. I'm just not going to do that. Anyway, I said to God, I'm not comfortable with my work situation. Can you handle it? I'm not going to fix this. I'm not going to go onto LinkedIn and get lots of strategies. I'm not going to do 47-point plans. I'm just going to ask you, is there anything you want me to do? And one day I was in the middle of doing something, and I got this little inspiration. Write to this person, one-line email, and ask a simple question. And it's to do a certain type of work I absolutely don't want to do. I hated the idea, and I wrote the email. Nothing happened. And then the next day, I wrote a similar email to someone else. Within a week, the amount of work that I was getting offered trebled. And I started doing the work I'd been avoiding for 20 years because I didn't agree with it. I love it. It's easy. It's smooth. It's I won't go into detail, but it's an absolute dream. It fills in all the gaps between my other jobs. I hated the idea of it, but I did what I was told with those two tiny little inspirations. I could have been working for 5 years trying to get my income sorted out. This kind of story, I've had lots of these in my life. So this whole trust God, take the next right action for me is AA. I don't need to be special. I don't need to be spiritual. I just need to do the really basic things in here and I'll be fine. Any final questions before we wrap up and go and play in the playground? No.
What age was on Awakening?
86.
That was the evening one, wasn't it?
That's also 86. Yes, very important page.
Yeah.
And just one tiny thing. With sponsees, the first thing I do, I go through 5 passages before we get into the beginning of the book. 84 to 86 gives you a basic program for the day. 67 solves resentment. 68 solves fear. 69 solves problems. 98 to 99, how to get on with your family. 117 to 118, how to resolve disagreement or dispute. And you're given that first, and that's just 98% of my program is on those few pages. Very simple. Thank you for having the patience to listen to me. Shall we close with the Serenity Prayer?
Yes. Shall we stand?
Yes, let's stand. Why not?
That's my party trick.
I'll join over here somewhere.
Thank you.
So, using the word God as you do or don't understand it. God. Grant